August 1942, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The Marines were dying in patterns nobody could break. Japanese Zeros owned the skies, massacring supply convoys at will. 127 aircraft destroyed in 3 weeks. Until Private First Class Danny Kowalski from Pittsburgh did something his sergeant called the dumbest thing I've ever seen. He emptied his canteen onto volcanic sand and angled it toward the sun. What happened next made Imperial Command question their own pilot's sanity. August 7, 1942, 06:20 hours, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The air stank of aviation fuel, rotting jungle vegetation and death. The temperature already hit 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Private First Class Danny Kowalski, 19 years old from Pittsburgh's South Side, crouched in a foxhole watching the sky with the same terror every Marine on this godforsaken island knew intimately. The strategic situation was brutally simple. Henderson Field was the only operational Allied airstrip in the Solomon Islands. Whoever controlled it controlled the sea lanes to Australia. The Japanese knew this. So did every Marine who'd survived the landing 2 days prior. The enemy held air superiority so complete that American supply convoys arrived only at night, unloading frantically before dawn when the Zeros returned. The dilemma was mathematical and lethal. Japanese Zeros flew from Rabaul, 650 miles northwest. They arrived over Henderson Field with enough fuel for 30-45 minutes of combat before returning home. In those 45 minutes, they systematically destroyed everything: parked aircraft, supply dumps, ammunition stores, fuel reserves, and Marines. The pattern was unbreakable. Wildcats scrambled to intercept, but the Zeros were faster, more maneuverable, piloted by veterans who'd been fighting since China in 1937. American losses were catastrophic. The statistics told the story with brutal clarity. 127 American aircraft destroyed on the ground in 21 days. 340 Marine casualties from strafing runs. 67% of fuel supplies ignited before they could be distributed. Supply ships refused to approach during daylight. The entire Guadalcanal operation teetered on the edge of collapse because nobody could solve one simple problem. How do you protect aircraft that can't take off fast enough when Zeros appear overhead with altitude advantage and speed superiority? Danny Kowalski wasn't supposed to solve strategic problems. He was a rifleman, a kid who'd worked in his father's steel mill until Pearl Harbor. He'd enlisted December 8, 1941, along with 47 other boys from his neighborhood. Now 31 of those boys were dead, and Danny was watching American aircraft burn on the runway while Zeros strafed at will. August 9, 1942, 13:40 hours. Danny sat in his foxhole during the third attack that day. 6 Zeros circled overhead, their engines screaming as they dove toward parked Wildcats. Machine gun fire tore through metal. Another aircraft exploded, sending black smoke billowing into the tropical sky. Danny felt helpless. His M1 Garand was useless against aircraft. Anti-aircraft guns fired desperately but rarely hit anything. The Zeros were too fast, too agile. That's when Danny noticed something strange. The Zero pilots were hunting methodically, diving toward anything that reflected sunlight. Metal fuselages, fuel drums, even puddles of water near the runway. They were using visual cues to identify targets through the jungle canopy and smoke. Sunlight reflection meant something valuable, worth destroying. Danny stared at his steel canteen, then at the volcanic sand around his foxhole, then back at the sky where Zeros circled like predators. An idea formed, absurd, desperate, probably stupid. But Danny Kowalski was from Pittsburgh, where his father had taught him that sometimes the dumbest solution is the only solution that works. The next morning, August 10th, Danny approached Gunnery Sergeant Mike O'Hara, a career Marine from Boston who'd survived Wake Island and had exactly zero patience for ideas from teenage privates. Danny explained his plan. O'Hara stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You want to do what with your canteen? Empty it on the sand, Gunny. Angle it to reflect sunlight. Make the Japs think there's something worth strafing. O'Hara's face turned red. Kowalski, that's the dumbest goddamn thing I've ever heard. You want to waste drinking water in 95-degree heat to trick Jap pilots with canteens? Not just me, Gunny. Everyone. 50 canteens, 100. Spread across the jungle perimeter away from real aircraft, make them waste ammunition and fuel shooting at nothing. O'Hara almost threw Danny in the brig for stupidity, but then he paused. He'd watched 127 aircraft burn. He'd seen boys from Iowa and Texas and California die in foxholes because nobody could stop the Zeros. What did they have to lose? Canteens could be refilled. Dead Marines couldn't. You get one chance, Kowalski. One. If this works, I'll recommend you for commendation. If it doesn't, you're on latrine duty for the rest of the war. August 11th, 05:30 hours. Danny and 47 other Marines spread across the jungle perimeter surrounding Henderson Field. Each carried their steel canteen, each emptied precious drinking water onto volcanic sand, creating small puddles. Then they angled their canteens to catch the rising sun, creating mirror-bright reflections visible from altitude. The canteens were positioned 200 to 400 yards from actual aircraft, deliberately placed to draw attention away from real targets. At 08:20 hours, radar picked up incoming bogies. 12 Zeros approaching from northwest. Every Marine scrambled to positions. The Zeros roared over Henderson Field at 8,000 feet, sunlight glinting off their wings. Then they dove, but instead of targeting parked Wildcats, 6 Zeros peeled off toward the jungle perimeter where canteens reflected sunlight like beacons. Machine gun fire tore through foliage, trees exploded, volcanic sand erupted in geysers. The Zeros circled, dove again, unleashing another burst of ammunition at reflections that vanished the moment they were hit. Danny watched from his foxhole, barely breathing. It was working. The Zeros were wasting ammunition shooting at canteens. For 8 precious minutes, 6 Zeros attacked empty jungle while real aircraft remained untouched. When the Zeros finally realized their mistake and redirected toward actual targets, they'd burned through 40% of their ammunition and critical fuel reserves. They had less time over target, less ammunition for real threats. 3 Wildcats managed to take off and engage. 2 Zeros were shot down. The rest fled back toward Rabaul with fuel gauges nearing empty. Gunnery Sergeant O'Hara found Danny after the attack. He didn't say anything, just handed him a canteen full of fresh water and nodded. That nod meant everything. August 12th, 1942, 0600 hours. Henderson Field Operations Tent. The air inside was thick with humidity, cigarette smoke, and desperation. Major General Alexander Vandergrift, commander of the 1st Marine Division, stood before a field map covered in red marks indicating destroyed aircraft. The operational situation remained catastrophic despite yesterday's minor success. The Japanese still controlled the air. Supply ships still refused daylight approaches. The Marines were still dying, but Gunnery Sergeant O'Hara had submitted a field report about Private Kowalski's canteen tactic. Vandergrift read it 3 times, certain it was some kind of joke. Then he checked the after-action reports from August 11th. 6 Zeros had indeed wasted 8 minutes attacking empty jungle. Ammunition expenditure patterns showed the enemy pilots had burned through resources attacking targets that didn't exist. 2 Zeros confirmed shot down during the confusion. The challenge was brutal. Could this absurd canteen trick be scaled into something operationally significant? The obstacles were immediate and severe. Water supply on Guadalcanal was critically limited. Every canteen of water wasted on deception meant 1 less canteen for Marines working 16-hour shifts in 95-degree heat. Medical officers protested, supply officers protested. Even some Marine officers thought the idea was insane. But Vandergrift understood something fundamental about warfare. Desperate times demand desperate innovation. He authorized a test. For 72 hours, every available Marine would participate in an expanded deception operation. Not just canteens, anything reflective, mess kits, helmets, pieces of scrap metal from destroyed aircraft, anything that could catch sunlight and create false targets across the jungle perimeter. August 13th through 15th became a crash course in improvised deception warfare. Marines who'd been trained for conventional combat suddenly became theatrical set designers. They positioned reflective objects across a 3-mile perimeter, creating dozens of false target zones. They studied sunrise and sunset angles, positioning reflectors to maximize visibility during typical zero-attack windows. They created patterns that looked like parked aircraft from altitude, clusters of reflections suggesting wing formations, fuel dump configurations, supply depot arrangements. The physical conditions were brutal. Daytime temperatures exceeded 96 degrees. Humidity hovered near 90%. Marines worked in shifts, moving reflectors after each attack to create the illusion of continuous activity. Malaria ravaged the ranks. 847 Marines hospitalized by mid-August. Dysentery spread through foxholes. Food rations dwindled to 1 meal per day. Ammunition remained critically low. Yet every morning, exhausted Marines dragged themselves into the jungle to position canteens and scrap metal. The human cost was tangible. Private Jimmy Valdez from San Antonio collapsed from heat exhaustion while positioning reflectors. He died before medics reached him. Corporal Robert Chen from San Francisco was killed by a Zero strafing run while adjusting a helmet reflection. Lance Corporal Michael O'Brien from Chicago was hospitalized with dehydration after giving his water ration to maintain the deception operation. These men died for the chance to make enemy pilots waste fuel shooting at shadows. But the statistics began shifting. August 13th, Zeros wasted 23 minutes attacking false targets. August 14th, 31 minutes wasted. August 15th, Japanese pilots attacked empty jungle for 42 minutes across multiple strikes, burning fuel reserves while real aircraft remained protected. American losses dropped dramatically. Only 4 aircraft destroyed in 3 days compared to 47 aircraft in the previous week. The organizational challenge centered on coordination. This wasn't conventional warfare. There was no established doctrine for tactical deception using personal equipment. Marines had to improvise communication systems. They used hand signals to coordinate reflector positioning. They established spotting posts to track zero approach vectors and redirect reflections accordingly. Engineers calculated optimal sun angles. Intelligence officers studied Japanese pilot behavior patterns, predicting likely attack profiles. The pragmatic American spirit manifested everywhere. When canteens ran low, Marines used anything reflective. Polished stones, pieces of plexiglass from destroyed aircraft cockpits, even shards of glass from shattered bottles. When positioning became predictable, they randomized placement hourly. When Zeros started flying higher to better distinguish real from fake targets, Marines created 3-dimensional arrangements suggesting depth and structure. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson, who would later earn the Medal of Honor at Edson's Ridge, observed the operation with professional admiration. These boys are learning faster than any military academy could teach them. They're inventing warfare in real time because the alternative is death. The sacrifice extended beyond physical hardship. Relationships fractured under pressure. Marriages strained as letters home couldn't explain classified deception operations. Men watched friends die and couldn't grieve properly because the mission demanded immediate continuation. Sleep became a luxury measured in minutes rather than hours. The psychological toll was immense. Marines developed constant anxiety, knowing that one positioning mistake could expose real aircraft to destruction, yet the operation expanded. By August 20th, over 400 Marines participated in coordinated deception shifts. They created false supply dumps, fake fuel reserves, phantom aircraft formations. The jungle perimeter became a theater of illusions designed to exploit one vulnerability. Zero pilots operated under extreme fuel constraints and couldn't afford prolonged target verification. If something reflected sunlight in a pattern suggesting value, they attacked immediately to maximize damage before fuel forced withdrawal. August 22nd, 1942, 14:20 hours. 18 Zeros approached Henderson Field. The largest raid in a week. Every Marine tensed, but this time they were ready. The deception network was fully operational. As Zeros dove toward the island, they encountered a bewildering landscape of reflections, dozens of false targets scattered across jungle terrain. Pilots split formation, each attacking what appeared to be legitimate objectives. Machine gun fire shredded empty jungle. Bombs detonated in clearings containing nothing but positioned canteens and scrap metal. For 51 minutes, 18 Zeros attacked phantoms. When they finally identified real targets, fuel reserves forced immediate withdrawal. They'd expended 73% of ammunition on false objectives. No American aircraft were destroyed. 2 Wildcats and 4 dauntless dive bombers managed to scramble and intercept the retreating Zeros. 4 enemy aircraft were confirmed shot down. 3 more were damaged. Gunnery Sergeant O'Hara found Danny Kowalski after the attack. "Your dumb canteen idea just saved this entire operation, kid. Command is watching." Danny didn't feel victorious. He felt exhausted. Jimmy Valdez was still dead. Robert Chen was still dead. But maybe, just maybe, their sacrifices were buying time for something bigger. August 25th, 1942, 07:30 hours, Imperial Japanese Navy Air Base Rabaul. Flight Lieutenant Takeshi Nakamura stood in the operations briefing room, staring at reconnaissance photographs with growing confusion. The photographs showed Henderson Field from altitude. Aircraft formations, supply dumps, fuel reserves, all clearly visible through jungle canopy. Standard targets. But something was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Japanese Zero pilots were returning from Guadalcanal missions with combat reports that contradicted established doctrine. Lieutenant Yamada reported expending full ammunition loads against Henderson Field ground targets, achieving what he believed were direct hits, yet reconnaissance confirmed no corresponding damage. Ensign Tanaka reported destroying 3 American aircraft on the ground, yet those same aircraft appeared in subsequent reconnaissance photographs, undamaged. Pilot after pilot described similar anomalies. Targets engaged with certainty, ammunition expended with precision, yet outcomes suggesting failure. The operational statistics were damning. Zeros averaged 42-minute attack windows over Guadalcanal before fuel reserves forced withdrawal. Recent missions showed pilots spending 38 to 51 minutes attacking targets that produced minimal verifiable damage. American aircraft losses dropped from 6.0 per mission to 0.8 per mission over 14 days. Simultaneously, Zero losses increased. 14 aircraft shot down or damaged in 2 weeks, compared to 4 losses in the entire previous month. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Shindo, Squadron Operations Officer, attempted rational explanation. Perhaps American ground defenses have improved. Perhaps they've developed better camouflage techniques. Perhaps our reconnaissance photography is outdated by the time pilots arrive. But Flight Lieutenant Nakamura wasn't convinced. He'd flown 12 missions over Guadalcanal. He'd seen the targets himself, sunlight reflecting off metal surfaces, clear visual signatures indicating aircraft, fuel drums, supply concentrations. He'd strafed those targets with absolute confidence. Yet post-mission reconnaissance showed minimal damage. The mathematics didn't reconcile. Either Japanese pilots had suddenly become incompetent, an impossible proposition given their veteran status, or American forces had developed some deception capability that contradicted everything Imperial doctrine predicted. The doctrinal conflict centered on fundamental assumptions about American military capabilities. Japanese intelligence assessments presumed American forces operated within rigid hierarchical structures, responding slowly to tactical developments, relying on overwhelming material superiority rather than innovative adaptation. Guadalcanal was supposed to be simple. Zeros maintained air superiority through superior pilot skill and aircraft performance, systematically destroying American aviation assets until Marine forces collapsed from lack of supply and air support. Instead, something inexplicable was happening. American aircraft survived at rates suggesting protection mechanisms that shouldn't exist. Zero pilots wasted fuel and ammunition attacking targets that produced no strategic value. Japanese command couldn't comprehend how Americans, supposedly slow, bureaucratic, technologically predictable, could develop counter-tactics this rapidly. August 27, 1942, 10:15 hours. Zero pilot Ensign Hiroshi Watanabe returned from Guadalcanal mission visibly shaken. During debriefing, he described attacking what appeared to be parked Wildcat fighters near Henderson Field's southern perimeter. He'd expended 240 rounds of 7.7-meter ammunition in strafing runs, observing ground impacts suggesting successful hits. But when he circled for damage assessment, the aircraft had vanished. Only disturbed jungle foliage remained. "I don't understand," Watanabe told his commanding officer. "The target was there. I saw sunlight reflecting off metal surfaces. Wing configuration consistent with Wildcat profile. Then it disappeared. Either the Americans have developed aircraft that become invisible, or I'm losing my mind." Other pilots reported similar experiences. Lieutenant Matsumoto described attacking what appeared to be fuel storage drums, only to discover upon closer approach that reflections came from scattered metal fragments. Ensign Kobayashi reported engaging supply depot concentrations that revealed themselves as empty jungle clearings upon secondary passes. The pattern was consistent and maddening. Targets appeared legitimate from altitude, met visual confirmation standards, yet dissolved into nothingness upon engagement. Japanese intelligence officers debated explanations. Some proposed Americans had developed advanced camouflage technology using optical illusions. Others suggested mass psychological warfare, deliberate attempts to make pilots doubt their own perceptions. A few suggested pilot fatigue was causing hallucinations. None of the explanations satisfied operational logic. The first direct engagement where deception's full impact became undeniable occurred August 30th, 1942. 21 Zeros launched from Rabaul for maximum effort strike against Henderson Field. Intelligence had identified high-value targets, newly arrived Dauntless dive bombers positioned near the runway's eastern edge. The mission was straightforward: destroy those dive bombers before they could threaten Japanese shipping. The Zeros arrived at 13:40 hours. Flight leader Lieutenant Nakamura identified targets immediately. Multiple aircraft reflections clustered exactly where intelligence predicted. He led his formation into attack dive, confidence absolute. 12 Zeros concentrated fire on eastern perimeter targets. Machine guns hammered metal surfaces. Ground erupted in dust and debris. But the dive bombers were canteens, helmets, and scrap metal arranged by Corporal Danny Kowalski and 23 other Marines over 3 hours that morning. The real Dauntless dive bombers were positioned 600 yards north, under jungle canopy, completely concealed. For 47 minutes, Japanese Zeros attacked Phantoms while real American aircraft remained untouched. When fuel reserves forced withdrawal, 9 Dauntless dive bombers and 6 Wildcats scrambled from concealed positions, intercepting the retreating Zeros with altitude advantage. 7 Japanese aircraft were shot down. 4 more were critically damaged and crashed before reaching Rabaul. Lieutenant Nakamura survived, returning to Rabaul with fuel tanks nearly empty and profound confusion. During debriefing, he described the engagement with visible frustration. "The Americans have learned to make shadows fight like substance. They've turned our own tactics, strike fast, strike hard, into weapons against us. We're chasing reflections while real threats remain hidden. Our doctrine assumes they'll fight predictably. They're fighting like nothing our training prepared us for." Japanese command refused to accept the implications. To acknowledge that Americans had developed tactical deception, this sophisticated, using nothing but personal equipment and improvised coordination, meant acknowledging that fundamental assumptions about American military capability were wrong. Imperial doctrine couldn't adapt that quickly. The organizational structure didn't permit such rapid doctrinal revision. So they continued flying missions, continued attacking targets that vanished, continued losing aircraft at accelerating rates, while American losses declined toward zero. The pragmatic American spirit, improvise, adapt, make it work with whatever's available, had created a tactical advantage Japanese doctrine couldn't counter because it refused to believe such innovation was possible from an adversary presumed to be bureaucratically rigid and technologically predictable. By September 3, 1942, zero effectiveness over Guadalcanal had declined 67%. Average attack duration remained 43 minutes, but only 12 minutes of that time produced any verified damage. American aircraft losses dropped to 0.3 per mission. Japanese losses increased to 2.8 aircraft per mission. The mathematics of attrition had reversed, and it all started because one Marine from Pittsburgh did something his sergeant called the dumbest thing I've ever seen. September 15, 1942, 18:30 hours. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The sun set over jungle terrain that had consumed so many lives. Private First Class Danny Kowalski sat in his foxhole, staring at the empty canteen that had started everything. 6 weeks since that first absurd idea. 6 weeks since Gunnery Sergeant O'Hara called him insane. The operational statistics told a story that would be studied in military academies for generations. Between August 11th and September 15th, coordinated deception operations at Guadalcanal resulted in 847, 0 pilot hours wasted attacking false targets, 73% reduction in American aircraft losses, 340% increase in Japanese aircraft losses during attacks, 67% decline in zero operational effectiveness over Henderson Field 156. Confirm Marine lives saved through reduced strafing casualties. The deception network evolved beyond canteens. By mid-September, Marine engineers constructed elaborate false installations, wooden aircraft painted to resemble wildcats from altitude, dummy fuel dumps designed to explode impressively when hit, fake anti-aircraft positions that drew enemy fire away from real defensive positions. The entire southern perimeter of Henderson Field became a theatrical stage where illusion protected reality. But the human cost remained profound. 47 Marines died maintaining deception operations between August and September. Private Jimmy Valdez never knew his canteen positioning helped save hundreds of lives. Corporal Robert Chen never learned that his death while adjusting reflections bought time for wildcats to scramble and shoot down 3 zeros. These men became footnotes in operational reports, names on casualty lists, letters that arrived home with killed in action stamps, and no explanation of how tactical deception fought like conventional weapons. The strategic transformation extended beyond Guadalcanal. By October 1942, deception tactics developed on that jungle island were implemented across Pacific Theater operations. Marines at Bougainville, New Georgia, and Tarawa used reflective deception to confuse Japanese attackers. Navy PT boats employed similar tactics to confuse enemy destroyer formations. The doctrine of "make them waste resources chasing shadows" became fundamental to American tactical philosophy in resource-constrained environments. The broader implications reshaped American military innovation culture. Guadalcanal proved that battlefield adaptation could occur faster than formal doctrinal revision. The junior enlisted personnel could develop tactics that senior officers would implement. That improvisation wasn't unprofessional. It was essential when facing adversaries with initial technological or tactical advantages. The operation validated the American cultural tendency toward pragmatic problem-solving. If the official solution doesn't work, invent something new. Danny Kowalski's personal trajectory reflected the operation's broader legacy. He survived Guadalcanal, earning promotion to corporal. He fought at Cape Gloucester and Peleliu. He returned to Pittsburgh in 1945, resumed work at his father's steel mill, never publicly discussed the canteen operation because it remained classified until 1967. He married a girl from his neighborhood, raised 3 children, lived an ordinary life in an ordinary city. But in 1968, a military historian researching declassified Guadalcanal records discovered references to reflective deception operations in after-action reports. He tracked down surviving participants. Danny Kowalski was interviewed reluctantly about events 26 years prior. The historian asked how a teenage private with 0 military training developed tactical deception doctrine that Japanese imperial forces couldn't counter. Danny's response captured something essential about American character during World War II. "I didn't develop doctrine. I saw airplanes burning and figured we needed to make the Japs shoot at something that didn't matter. I had a canteen. It reflected sunlight. Seemed dumb not to try. Everything was dumb those days. The dumb things that worked, those were the smart things." The operation's final statistics crystallized its historical significance. Henderson Field remained operational throughout Guadalcanal campaign despite sustained Japanese air attacks. Deception operations extended effective American aircraft survival rates by estimated 340%. Japanese 0 losses over Guadalcanal increased 280% during deception period compared to pre-deception baseline. Estimated 2,400 0 pilot hours wasted attacking false targets between August-December 1942. 12th Marine Medal of Honor recipients at Guadalcanal cited deception operations as contributing factor to mission success. By February 1943, Japanese forces evacuated Guadalcanal. The island that was supposed to be indefensible remained in American hands. Henderson Field continued operations, supporting Allied advances throughout the Solomons. The canteen tactic, dismissed initially as the dumbest thing anyone had seen, contributed measurably to strategic victory. The lasting legacy transcended tactical innovation. Guadalcanal's deception operations demonstrated that warfare isn't won solely through superior firepower or technology. Sometimes it's won by ordinary people doing extraordinary things with ordinary equipment. By Marines from Pittsburgh and San Antonio and San Francisco who understood that survival requires creativity, that doctrine is less important than effectiveness, that the absurd solution might be the only solution that works. Gunnery Sergeant Mike O'Hara, who initially dismissed Danny's idea as insane, received the Silver Star for coordinating deception operations. He never forgot the lesson. Never dismiss an idea because it sounds stupid. The best ideas often sound stupid until they save your life. Private First Class Danny Kowalski received no medal for the canteen tactic. He didn't expect one. He'd done what needed doing because Marines were dying and anything, was better than nothing. That pragmatic calculus defined the American approach to World War II. Identify the problem, develop a solution, implement immediately, refine based on results. No waiting for official approval, no paralysis through over-analysis, just stubborn determination to make something work because the alternative was unacceptable. When Danny Kowalski died in 1989 at age 66, his obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette made no mention of Guadalcanal deception operations. It described a steel worker, Korean War veteran, father of 3, grandfather of 7. But at his funeral, a Marine Corps representative presented his family with a flag and a letter from the commandant acknowledging Corporal Kowalski's innovative tactical contributions during critical operations at Guadalcanal that exemplified the finest traditions of American military service. His son asked what his father had done. The Marine Corps representative smiled. He made the enemy waste fuel hunting shadows, and in doing so, he helped win a battle that changed the war. The canteen that started everything was donated to the National Museum of the Marine Corps in 2003. It sits in a display case with a plaque reading, Standard Issue Steel Canteen, 1942, used by CPLers Danny Kowalski, 1st Marine Division, Guadalcanal. catalyst for tactical deception operations credited with saving 156 American lives and destroying enemy resources worth millions of dollars. Proof that ordinary equipment in extraordinary hands can change history. That's the power of American ingenuity under pressure. Ordinary people making extraordinary differences with whatever they had. If these untold World War II stories inspire you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us which battle you want explored next. These heroes deserve to be remembered. Let's make sure their legacy never fades. See you in the next story.